So funny.
All right, and this is about to start.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second information session for 2025. We've invited you to this webinar today. If I could ask everyone to put their mic on mute, that would be awesome. There's just a bit of interference coming. As I was saying, we've invited you to this webinar today to share best practice in providing respectful treatment to persons adversely affected by crime, as prescribed under the Victims Charter and the regulations. We base all our guidance and work around trauma-informed practice. I'm really pleased that we're joined today by members of our Lived Experience Advisory Group and invite you to ask questions today, but keep in mind a trauma-informed approach. So my name is Russell Hooper. I've been the interim CEO here at the Office of the Victims of Crime Commissioners for around 6 months. And it's been an amazing 6 months since I commenced, where we've been able to hear directly from people who have been adversely affected by crime and people who come to work every day to support them, i.e. you. I also note we're today joined by Matt Hall, who is the new CEO of the Commissioner's Office, who's waving, who will get to introduce himself a little later. Many of you may know Matt from his career, but for those who don't, you'll have the pleasure of getting to know him, noting he just started yesterday. So before we commence, our workshop is being held on the lands and under the skies of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. I would like to pay my
Come in.
I'd
I
like
want to talk to you.
I would like to pay my deep respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and Aboriginal elders and other communities who are able to be here today. We acknowledge this land was never ceded and always will be, always was Aboriginal land. I would be remiss for not acknowledging the array of lands on which our guests to this information session are on today, and encourage you to reflect the lands of which you're currently on in the chat function. I also want to pay my respects to victim survivors and acknowledge their ongoing strength, resilience, and resolve. Their continued advocacy to advance policy, law, and justice reform is critical to the reforms that have already been achieved so far and to improve the justice system into the future. As I mentioned, we have several members of our Lived Experience Advisory Group, or LEAGUE, with us, who are victim survivors of crime. I want to acknowledge the importance of their contribution and how to shape the guidance note that we'll be talking about today. I also want to acknowledge the resilience and thank them for the commitment to making change. It's so wonderful to work with them, and I look forward for us to be speaking with them a little bit later. So, nearly enough of my voice, everybody. Before we get started, I just need to do a bit of housekeeping. I'm unsure where your emergency exits are, but if there is an emergency, I strongly encourage you to leave. This session is being recorded, so you'll be able to come back to it, and the recording will be made available after this session. If you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function somewhere at the top of your screen, and these questions will be answered in the last segment of today's webinar. At the end, we'll all be given an opportunity to put your hands up and ask questions on video if you want to as well. We'd love to hear your voice. But if there are some questions you want to ask more privately or think of something after the session ends, please feel free to email chartercompliance@vocc.vic.gov.au, and we'll make sure the question goes to the right person. So that's the end of the housekeeping. And with that, I'm so pleased to introduce the Victims of Crime Commissioner of Victoria, Elizabeth Langdon, to present the important topic we are discussing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. And it's absolutely terrific to be here with you all. Good morning, everyone, from wherever you're dialing in from. And I'm delighted that you've found time in your diary to join us today to discuss this important topic with us. For those who haven't met me yet, I'm Elizabeth Langdon. I'm the Victims of Crime Commissioner in Victoria, commenced in the role in August of last year, and have been so grateful for the time that many of the agencies on this line or people who've joined today have spent talking to me and my office since I joined. We've been out and about meeting as many people as we can, and most importantly, hearing from victim survivors about their experience in the justice system. It's really fabulous to be here with such a wide range of people and agencies, And I know that there are people who've dialed in from across the state, because we are all committed to improving the experience of victims of crime in the justice system. I'm also delighted today that we will be hearing directly from members of our lived experience group, which Russell mentioned, and I can't overemphasize or describe enough how important it is for me and this office to really hear the insights, knowledge, and expertise of this group of people who spend their time with us and talk about the work that we do. So up on the slide there, we're joined by other people from the team here. So you've heard from Russell. Matt, you've just met. Maddie Ezard is our Senior Regulatory Officer and is online. We've also got Lucy Knox, our Manager of the Victim Engagement, and Briley Miller, our Senior Lived Experience Lead. And I think Briley's going to give us a wave there. So thank you for everyone from the office for joining in. Look, today we're going to be talking about some aspects of the Victims Charter which really go to how agencies treat people affected by crime. All victim survivors are entitled to be treated with dignity, courtesy and respect. And of course, those principles are in the Victims Charter, which is, as you know, law in Victoria. Victim survivors are also entitled to have their individual needs considered when navigating what is no doubt an extremely difficult time in life. So how we're going to do that is to look at the meaning of these two principles, so principles 6 and 7A, so that we give you some practical guidance and support in the work that you do every day. And we'll be looking at those principles through the lens of victim survivors and the kind of treatment that we've heard that they expect to receive in every context and every stage of their journey. And importantly, we'll hear from members of our league group who've been generous enough to share today some of their experiences in the justice system and how that treatment has shaped their journey. So across the session today, we'll be exploring how this Victims Charter Act can be and is being applied practically. And I should say that many of you will be deeply skilled in this work, of course, and we're loving the opportunity today to hear from you too about what you're doing in your workplaces. So this is a practical session and it's aimed at providing practical support. We'll prompt you throughout the session to think about gaps in your organisation or things that you're doing particularly well, and thinking about ideas for areas where you might improve your practice. And we really want to hear your feedback about what works for you. So I note that everyone absorbs and receives information differently. I certainly do. I'm a visual person, so I find conversation and visual ways of learning really, really helpful to me in this role. So many people find short documents, short guidance material, short checklists and really hands-on tools absolutely fundamental to their working day. And so we are launching today new guidance material, which has just been prepared by my office. And this is going to provide really simple guidance about how you can make sure in your organisations that you have the fundamentals to comply with the Charter. And then also stepping through ways that actually we can exceed those sort of foundational levels. I also wanted to acknowledge that agencies have really different strengths and resources. And I recently travelled to Bendigo, Geelong, Horsham and Warrnambool and saw firsthand the different ways that organisations are working with different strengths and resources fit for purpose for their context. So wherever you are and whatever work you're doing, we really hope you take away something from today. So before we hear from the main speakers, I want to briefly mention the relevant principles in the Charter. As many of you know, there are 17 principles, and you can see them there in the billiard balls or ping pong balls or donuts, whatever those circles mean to you. Hope you've all had a coffee. I'm seeing donuts. So those 17 principles, really today we're focusing on 2 of them. So Principle 6 and 7A. The Charter, as you know, really sets out the victim survivors' entitlements and rights in Victoria. And Principles 6 and 7A, as you probably know, are applicable to all agencies. They encapsulate, if you like, the basic entitlement to receive good treatment and not to be discriminated against on the basis of any of the protected characteristics, including but not limited to gender identity, race, disability. I want to really highlight that providing safe and accessible services to victim survivors in all circumstances is a minimum requirement under the Victims Charter Act. So this is a nice to have, not a nice to have. It absolutely is not a nice to have. It's the law. So today we're going to provide you with some further insights and resources to support you to achieve this. And as Russell may have mentioned, the session today has been absolutely designed based on feedback we've received from agencies who want practical tools to understand how to implement the Charter. So I'll start by giving a brief overview of what we've talked about the League, so the Lived Experience Advisory Group that works with my office. It consists of 8 fabulous people, 8 members who meet regularly to give their views and feedback on issues and topics affecting victims of crime. This group has been instrumental in providing regular feedback to us, and it provides us with a mechanism, if you like, to engage with victims of crime, to hear about their experience, and then embed their voices in our work across the office. We're based in Melbourne, but we very much see our role as being a whole of state role. So wherever victim survivors are across the state, we have a role for them in this office. Lucy and Briley, as I mentioned before, from our victim engagement team, are online with us, and they administer this group in terms of running the sessions and organising the program and providing support and working with that group on a very regular basis. So if you'd like any more information about this lived experience group, please reach out to us. With that context, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to our first video. So we've got some videos today by 2 members of our lived experience group. So Anna is our first speaker. Anna has worked with us to produce a short video in which she gives her views in response to questions about what good treatment looks like for victim survivors accessing services. Anna here provides, you'll see, a really open and honest version of her story, and which does mention suicidal ideation. So just a note for everyone online, please take the time to take care of yourself if this brings up anything for you.
So good treatment to me looks like being believed. So really telling us that you believe what had happened and not being told what to do about it information and who not to disclose to. It looks like informing a person what their basic fundamental human rights and being respected as an individual with unique experiences. It looks like acting for our best interest and being kind, empathetic, with deep listening involved. It looks like referring us to services that are timely, taking accountability for their services while also being trauma-informed. It looks like not forcing victims to retell their story over and over, but having cross-sector collaboration to make sure that the victim survivor feels safe and taken care of. It's about being proactive instead of reactive in engagement approaches with victim survivors and consulting what the best support looks like for them. Good treatment promotes empowerment and agency for individuals while taking into account culture and other intersectionalities. A time that I experienced treatment was when I first disclosed, and the wellbeing deputy principal in my school sat me down, and she told me that she believed in me and that it was my fault. And then she referred me to the appropriate services. Another example of good treatment was when I told CASA that one of the counsellors wasn't working for me, and then they gave me the ability to switch to someone else. So the second counsellor I matched with was very patient. She asked me what my needs were and did her best to accommodate me. She helped me work not only on my traumatic experiences, but a whole heap of other things too. So it's providing this holistic care. She not only believed me, told me that it wasn't my fault, but it also helped me unpack and understand why. She listened, let me finish my sentences, and validated my experiences. This is something we can learn as good treatment from individuals. Just like not being believed, I think is a huge thing. I think people need to take into account and make sure that, you know, the language that they use is really validating for a victim survivor's experience. Something that I wish existed was that if I could have an advocate when I first told my experience to someone, and to have them liaise with counsellors, police, etc. So I wouldn't have to come out every single time feeling extremely traumatized and having to relive everything. This can help victim survivors in the initial recovery to have more time to look after themselves and look for solutions rather than highlighting only the problem. Another example is the initial stages of the referral. Unfortunately, I had to wait half a year for CASA. I was feeling really suicidal at the time, and I wished that I could get timely services for me or other victim survivors, because something bad could have happened in the beginning phases without the proper supports in place. So for me, it's respectful engagement, accountability, managing perceptions and biases, providing agency and empowerment to victim survivors, and being aware of cultural barriers. Respectful engagements involve being aware of your tone and language when engaging with victim survivors, respecting the individual and being believed. An example of what not to do, which I can speak from experience, was I remember when I first reported my case to the police, the male police officer blatantly told me that he did not believe me and asked me if I wanted it. His tone was very condescending and the conversation was incredibly disrespectful. This is something that you don't want to be doing. I remember when I engaged with the second female police officer, she told me that she could retrieve the documents on my phone to help me find some evidence to take my case to court. A few weeks later, she told me that wasn't possible anymore, without any explanation why, which broke my trust. There wasn't any follow-up from her, and I kept having to initiate contact, which really frustrated me. Accountability looks like, number 1, setting realistic expectations with victims about the process, and number 2, listening to complaints and investigating with victims' best interests in mind. So managing your perception and biases so that victims don't have to pretend or mold themselves into a perfect victim to feel believed. It's also important not to make assumptions about lived experience and taking intersectional experiences into account, while it's making sure that the language you use doesn't excuse a perpetrator's behaviour. The next thing is to give victim survivors agency and empowering them to reach their full potential. This can be done through timely support services that take into account individual needs such as disability, transport from rural locations, and family and living situations. So another thing that I wish the police did was encourage me to pursue my case instead of telling me to give up because there isn't enough evidence. And letting a person choose what to do promotes the agency when so much power has already been taken away from them. It also looks like asking victim survivors how they were coping, following up with them, asking for their feedback, telling them only to say what they are comfortable talking about. The last thing is having good cultural competency through gaining adequate training or listening to diverse, culturally and linguistically diverse experiences. Also being aware that culture can intersect from the LGBTQIA+ community, attitudes about young people and neurodiverse communities.
So I'd like to thank Anna very much for sharing her experience. I believe Anna's with us today, and her generosity in providing her experience and these invaluable insights. I can't express my gratitude enough to you, Anna. Thank you for sharing. Anna mentioned several overarching components to good treatment, which really struck us here in the office. Respectful engagement, managing perceptions and biases, agency and empowerment, accountability, and cultural competency. So there are also these are also some of the behaviours that we'd like to see reflected in your annual compliance survey, because this helps us to understand what compliance with the principles looks like. So for those who attended our last information session, which was just after Christmas, actually in late January, early February, I mentioned that we've heard from agencies about the need for much clearer, simpler guidance on complying with the Victims' Charter. So I'm excited to tell you today that our first guidance document around Principle 6 and 7A specifically will soon be released and will be distributed and posted online after today's session. So we thought it was important to start with a foundational piece, and that being about the treatment of victims of crime, of people who are affected by crime, and Principles 6 and 7A really provide those foundational elements. And our office has developed some work that's on the screen now, and we're calling this an agency capability map, which outlines actions and policies which we'd expect from all organisations. So we note that all organisations are different. Small, large, regional, metro, newer organisations that have been in this space for a very long time. All organisations are different. And this is advice that is being provided broadly. The map's really tiered, so you can see that there are foundational items which we'd expect most organisations would have in place or would be striving for in 2025. And the three tiers really reflect a pathway for maturing policies and practice, some of which we've already heard very loudly are in place in many organisations, but not all, but many. So when we send this around, we'll really invite you to reflect on your organisation's policies, procedures, and your culture around Principles 6 and 7A. So to reflect sort of locally in your own workplaces about where you stand on this map, and also use it as a tool, as a starting point for that conversation. So I'd like to, of course, say this is a new approach for our office. And we really want to make sure that the information is useful. So please provide us any feedback about how we can further enhance any of the documents that we provided, the agency capability map or any of the other guidance materials. We really want your feedback.
Elizabeth, one of the elements we've included in the guidance document is around the physical environment. And I know that in our recent site visits that you mentioned just before to Bendigo, Geelong, Warrnambool and Horsham, there was something which you might have been quite taken by.
Yeah, thanks, Russell, and shout out to Kay and the others who are online who we've seen in recent weeks. And thank you for your welcome while we were visiting you. Absolutely right, Russell. We were so struck by the physical environment in many of the offices we visited. The use of weighted toys, the use of light and colour, where brochures were distributed or not distributed, the very, very thoughtful way that physical spaces had been, I guess, developed, really with that sort of victim lens so clearly evident. We're also delighted to meet Baylor, the therapy dog in Geelong, who was a particular hit. And many of your offices will have particular approaches in place, really, so that you have really considered the physical environment. If you're not at that stage yet, and certainly my own office is in a journey in that way, I really encourage you to think deeply about your physical space. So often victims of crime tell us that they experience clinical environments, and that's just another discomfort after what for so many people is a terrible experience. So the efforts that I've seen in my brief visit around the state has been so impressive, whether it's been plants, seating arrangements, being offered a glass of water, weighted blanks, as I said, so many things in the physical environment that are so welcoming.
I was also infatuated by Baylor, who was adorable, and we almost got to meet the court dog at the Melbourne County Court when we visited, but apparently they have really good labour laws for these therapy dogs, so it's great. So I guess the point of how to create a welcoming environment for people who've experienced crime has been something we have heard a lot about, and I know that some of the places we visited had significant investment as well, which is obviously challenging. But I guess the point we've really seen made is it simple things organisations can do to make an environment more welcoming.
Thanks, Russell. So really delighted to let you know that we're now going to hear from another member of our league group, Christy, who's going to provide us her thoughts on questions about the impact of a welcoming environment for a person affected by crime. And I'd like to thank Christy for joining us today and for the video.
By making the whole interaction within my control, by letting me pick where and when and how, and when I was ready to have those conversations. My support worker was amazing. I actually looked up to her because she went above and beyond. If there was something that she wasn't aware of or didn't know much about, she would actually go and do more research or ask people or find out an answer. And if she didn't have an answer, she would say to me, I don't have that answer right now, but I will find out for you and let you know. And so, just that trust that I had in her and faith that if she says that's what it is and that's what it is, that makes a huge impact, because it takes a lot of weight off you, because you've already got struggles going on in your everyday life. Just to know that someone's there and batting for you makes a huge difference. And the way that she delivered the information in a way that was helpful for me, rather than just, this is what it is. So yeah, that extra level of care and concern really does have a huge impact. I was made to feel like I had choices, because my choices had been taken away from me. And I had some control over my life. But importantly too, I felt like someone was listening to me and taking my story seriously. And I felt like, that had a huge impact on me, that someone was actually prepared to listen and believed my story. if I had a poor first impression, I think my trust would have been further broken, what was left of it. My mental health would have been even more impacted. It would have reinforced my perpetrator's words and actions, made me believe that that was in fact true, and created further distrust to anyone who genuinely was trying to support me. I would not have been in any position to open up and give my full cooperation and support for that. I think those values are absolutely essential. It makes a huge impact on you as a person, how you move forward, and what your future looks like. I think importantly, I want to say that they are constantly working towards improving themselves and the experience of victims, which is a great thing. For me, a more casual environment and less clinical. I felt very claustrophobic going into a cubicle with 4 walls and a floor and a seat and a table. It felt more like an interrogation room. And I think being more perceptive of your clients' needs, reading, their body language, offering a beverage, or even, just to pause and have a break for a minute if they're struggling. The lady who supported me was through a mainstream organisation, and when she got to the point where she couldn't support me anymore, she then helped me get into an Indigenous family violence organisation, and they literally just come in, and she did a great handover, and sort of we all got together in the same room. So that was good, and not to have to explain my story, but then they were able to support me culturally as well with the nuances that a mainstream organisation didn't quite understand or get. And that, like I said before, like if my worker didn't understand something, she would go and research it more and find out and do the best she could, but there were certain things that she was never able to help me with. And so it got to that point where she realised that that a culturally appropriate service would have been better to support me.
Well, thank you so much to Christy for providing your insights and sharing your experiences, and for taking the time to share your story. From Christy's experience, we heard a couple of things we thought it was important to highlight. That Christy received choices and had control and agency about how she was receiving support. She also mentioned that her support worker took her seriously and believed her story, building trust and validating her experiences. We heard that the agency provided choices about when, where, and how often to meet, and listened to Christy's preferences for how she'd like to be communicated with. And we heard that the agency did what I think is really positive, in that they actually recognise their own limitations and the limitations that they had and the support that they could provide to Christy, and undertook that warm referral, which is one of the items listed on that capability map. So a warm referral to an Indigenous organisation. So Russell, I think you're now going to take us through the next part of the session.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and also thank you, Christy. That when I first watched that video, it was really impactful. So thank you. We're going to attempt to do something a little bit more interactive now, which I'm informed will work. Fingers crossed, everyone. But we thought we've been talking and you've been listening a lot, so it'd be good to get you a bit more engaged in the session. So we're doing a Menti meter thing. So if you use the QR code in the top right hand corner, I'm always bad with my left and rights, it should take you to a site on your phone which will give you an opportunity to answer this question, which is, what could you point to in your agency that supports your compliance levels, compliance to principles 6 and 7A? So, of course, we've heard quite a lot about principles 6 and 7A today, including from our 2 league members. So I encourage you to put some stuff in while I kind of try and fill the noise void. While we're waiting, I'm going to go off script. Maddie's going to kill me. But maybe, Matt, did you want to introduce yourself and who you are and why you're here?
Yeah, thanks very much, Russell, and Elizabeth and everybody. I don't want to kind of distract you from what you're doing here, but yeah, just to say hello, this is my second day Victims of Crime Commissioner, and really excited to be doing this work. I won't go into great detail now about my background, except to say that it's an area that I've I guess worked in for a lot of my career, and aligns with the values and the interests that I have very closely. I've worked with a lot of you in different with different hats on and in different kind of roles in the past, and really looking forward to hopefully catching up, engaging with you as I go forward in this role. Really interested in the collaborative approach we can take. I mean, I certainly take my lead from the Commissioner on this. This is about working together with for victims and with victims, but working together with agencies to find the best practice, to troubleshoot the things that don't go well, and to do it as a collaborative exercise. And I feel really positive about that. So excited to be here and great to see you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt, and I apologise for putting you on the spot.
No, not
so
at all.
we've got some Thank you. We've got some responses coming through, and I'll just read them because it gives it a bit more style. So availability of social workers, finding appropriate spaces to work with victims of crime when they enter the service, which has made it to the map that Elizabeth was talking about earlier. We have a practice framework that describes and guides our approach with working with clients. It's really interesting in the last few months, just speaking about how people have implemented the charter in different ways, and that there is kind of a collective of information available. It's inspiring a little bit. Believing victim survivors, visual environment, posters recognising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as well as LGBTI communities. A warm, gentle setting for victim survivors, court support for those engaging in the court process, including a support dog. I highly endorse the support dog. Sensory items in remote witness rooms, providing information and updates on court processes, trauma-informed spaces in the office for client appointments, and code of conduct, organisational statement of values, client intake procedure, child and young person wellbeing and safety policy, and privacy policy, which, as you'll see when our guidance is distributed shortly, this has a high level of alignment, which is it's really excellent to see. Without trying to fill this noise void anymore, I'm going to welcome the Commissioner back to maybe take some questions.
Thanks very much, Russell, and thanks to everyone who participated in the Mentimeter activity. That provides sort of such rich first-hand experience, I guess, from you guys who've dialed in today to share what you're doing in your own organisation. I would like to stress the point, as you think about any questions that you'd like to ask, and please do put it in the chat if you'd like to ask a question or raise your hand, that the materials we've developed for agencies, it's a new approach from the office. So we're really trying to respond to the requests for more information more helpful documents that that step out what good compliance looks like. We're very open to feedback about them. If there are things that don't resonate or that we need to amplify a bit more, omissions or things that that you think that you can push us a little harder. Some of these comments on the Mentimeter, you know, you might say that actually pushes the practice harder than we've set out. So very much, as Matt said, a collaborative effort. Us absolutely committed to providing support to agencies as we look at what does good agency compliance look like with the Charter. It's the second information session for the year, and we've got some others planned. So I'm absolutely committed to sort of that education, best practice and sharing information. The documents will, and we can talk about that in a second, the documents will be provided to you, and we really hope that they're helpful for generating conversation, validating practice, helping with orientating new staff or recruitment. There could be a whole range of things that really help you to check and also help us to understand what excellent practice looks like across Victoria. So please do let us know if you've got any feedback. So I don't seem to have any questions in the chat. Does anyone want to raise their hand if you've got any questions that you're interested in asking? I'd certainly like to. Oh, good. We've got one. Let's have a look. Hello, Pete from VicPol. Thank you. Great session. And the question is, does VOCC have any training available for police to improve on victim engagement? So thank you very much for the question. We've been really keen to work with Victoria Police closely, and we've had some really productive meetings in recent weeks around the review of the Charter. So many of you will know that we're doing a review of this Charter. We're also about to visit the Academy in early June to talk about, understand the training that's in place. And I would certainly be really happy to myself to understand more about the training that we provide. I know that there's training in the Academy, I believe, about the Victims Charter, but I think your point about police might encounter a victim initially, the front decks, but might be focused on other competing demands. So certainly we can take that up with Victoria Police, and we are very committed to working with police in the training approach. So we've had some fantastic meetings in recent months about that. So thank you for raising the question. Very committed to that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Russell, I might hand back to you, I think.
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to hand over to Matt in a to close off the session, unless there's any additional feedback or just insights that people would like to provide before we sign off for the day. I'll give 5 seconds for the hand to be raised. Okay, well, of course, if there's any additional questions or you'd want to ask them outside of this session, we're of course available to answer them. You can email chartercompliance@vocc.vic.gov.au, or if you have existing contacts with the office, obviously feel free to reach out at any time. But with that in mind, I'll hand over to Matt to close the session.
Thanks very much, Russell. And before I go on, I do just want to particularly thank and acknowledge Russell. You've worked with him over the last 5 months. It's hard to believe it's only 5 months coming in here. Russell's done such a power of work in that period of time. I don't think I've ever been set up for success quite this well coming into a new role, Russell. And I don't say that lightly. It's I'm very grateful for everything you've done, and I'm sure everyone here has really enjoyed working with you. I've got a lot to do to match that kind of commitment and engagement, so I'm looking forward to giving that a red hot go, though. Also, just to acknowledge Anna and Kirsty, there is really nothing like hearing from victim survivors in learning what's important to them. As the Commissioner said, there were really, I guess for me, three things that were really clear: being treated with respect and dignity, which is clearly a centrepiece of the Charter. Being listened to and believed is such a critical thing for agencies to be able to convey to and make victim survivors feel, and having that control and agency over the process to the extent that they possibly can. Get those three things right, and I think almost inevitably victims will be well looked after and get a great outcome. So, but I do want to acknowledge Anna and Kirsty, what an incredibly kind of informative and courageous and committed thing to do, to engage in this process, which you're only doing to help other victims have a great experience. So thank you. Okay, so going forward, this is the first of a number of sessions which we'll be holding, and they've been based, as was said before, on the feedback from agencies. So we really want to make sure they're targeted and focused on the things that are going to mean the most for you and have the best impact. There's a schedule there on the screen of the sessions coming up, and we'll be sending invitations out and newsletters and other info as those come up. Just to reiterate, it's what we're really hoping to do is draw out best practice and good practice and get your input on that, as well as input, obviously, most importantly, what victims have found to be the most effective, and putting those things together, but also seeing how we can unpack things that didn't go so well and understand why that was and how that can be improved on. So I'm really keen to hear from you about your ideas about that, everyone here. I know we've got a lot of that feedback already, but the more we get about what to do to get it right, the better for everybody. Keep us updated as to your contact details and those in your organisations who will be able to engage in these processes for us, so we can keep in touch with you. And that's it from us. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming along. I'm looking forward to seeing you, as I said, in other forums or individually and at future sessions. I think I might have the last word. That never happens. So thanks, and see you later, everyone. Thanks very much, in particular to, of course, the Commissioner and to Russell and to the victim survivors for their presentations.